Hey, here we are, Sports Bit Betting Insight today. Pauly and Teddy, Thursday, October 12th. Big game breakdown. Thursday means the four key college games. We'll look at Oklahoma, Texas, a stat on Tom Herman as an underdog. You will not believe Auburn-LSU, Georgia Tech-Miami, and UCLA and Arizona. No bad beats, bad bets, or bad for the books, but Major League Baseball playoffs. Strasburg decides to give it a go, and he throws a shutout, gets a little help from the bullpen, and they force a game 5 today against the Cubs. I don't know what these they do it again. For whatever reason, Madden goes to Edwards with a guy on first and 2 outs. He gives up a grand slam. Well, actually walks 2 guys. Davis gives up the grand slam. 1-0 becomes 5-0, and we get the game 5 today. But the Nationals bats against the Cubs starters failed to do anything again.
Yeah, when you look at Washington in this series, they've scored 3 runs in the first 7 innings of the first 4 games combined. They scored 9 runs after the 7th inning. All their damage has come against the Chicago's bullpen, as it did last night. But for the course of the series, it's not like the Nats have really gotten going offensively yet, not even a little bit. Of course, they still have one more chance to do that today. But let's talk about Strasburg. You know, on yesterday's show, we made fun of Dusty Baker for not starting Strasburg, and then apparently the decision-making process went to that they put him out to the hill. What do you have? Twice as many strikeouts, 12, as base runners allowed, 5. He was dominant once again, putting the Cubs' chances for defending their title in a little bit of jeopardy as they travel to D.C. today for the crucial Game 5.
They were sent out $1.30 as we tape. It's Hendricks, and we don't know who the Nationals are throwing. Gonzalez, Roark, who knows? Expect Scherzer to come out of the bullpen, but Dusty is insane as we record this early in the morning. Hendricks was terrific in Game 1. He was money in the Game 6 win at home in the NLCS, so he's been a big money pitcher for the Cubbies. We'll see if this factors into Dusty's decision. Gonzalez did not pitch well in Game 2 when they were down 3-1 in the bottom of the 8th, and then Edwards and the Cubs bullpen blew up. So we'll see if the road team can get it done again on the road, as the other 3 teams did. We're able to finish off the series on the road.
From all indications, it's going to be Gio Gonzalez for Chicago, for Washington, I should say. Gonzalez is expected to get the start. How long he stays in the game is another question entirely. But you can look here and see the stats from both Gio Gonzalez and Kyle Hendricks in their first match. But the series, Gonzalez only lasted 5 innings, gave up 3 runs, 2 of them dingers. Rizzo and Contreras hit home runs against him. Meanwhile, Kyle Hendricks was dominant in Game 1, 7 innings, only 2 hits, no runs allowed, 12 ground ball outs, only 2 through the air for Kyle Hendricks. So the market's moving heavily towards Washington and early betting action. The Cubs have gone from being road favorites to basically being pick'em for tonight's contest.
All right, and here's a big upset. Yankees were 8-1 to win the series when they were down 0-2 at William Hill, and a team that had won 22 in a row in 102 games and went into the playoffs on a 34-4 run. They blow a 2-0 lead, and for the first time since late July, the Indians lose 3 in a row. They rough up Kluber twice. Gregorius hits 2 home runs. Yankees bullpen Robertson and Chapman shut the door. CeCe, 2 years ago, he was going to rehab. He had a drinking problem when they had the play-in game against the Astros. The Indians go out and the Yankees move on. Game 1 tomorrow. They face Keuchel in the ALCS.
Yeah, I mean, let's give Didi credit. Taking Kluber deep twice in that contest. The second home run really seemed to took the steam out of whatever was left in Cleveland's fight in that contest. And how about CeCe and that Yankees bullpen? We talked about how dominant that bullpen was prior to the series, and it was supposed to be every bit as dominant as Cleveland's. It was better than Cleveland's in the series. CeCe and the Yankees bullpen combined to strike out 15 batters last night while dealing only 2 walks. Big upset win for the Yankees in Game 5. Big upset win for the Yankees in the series. Now they move on to Houston, who I think will be even tougher competition for the Yankees to survive and advance against.
Indians 3-17 in October when they can clinch a series, including 6 in a row losses. I can't believe that. College football, early week line moves. Early money for Texas Tech against West Virginia. Michigan against Indiana. Louisville against BC. Some UNLV money, surprise, against Air Force, and they're betting the new coach theory is Gary Anderson quits, leaves Oregon State against Colorado, and Mississippi State money against god-awful BYU, and Texas A&M against Florida with all their issues as well. A&M getting some support on the road, a bit of a surprise. And we'll see. UTEP got the money last week, and they're one of the worst teams in college football. We'll see if the same thing happens with Oregon State.
Yeah, I mean, it's a situation here where we got a handful of teams that the markets are looking to bet on and a handful of teams that the markets are very comfortable betting against right now. Certainly Texas Tech is a team the markets have been hot on over the last week or two, and deservedly so. The Red Raiders have been playing above their level. So we're seeing money for Texas Tech against West Virginia. You know, the Michigan money surprised me a little bit. Maybe Wolverines off a 5-turnover loss. I think they're betting Harbaugh in that regard. But there hasn't been a lot of respect for Indiana in the betting markets, and there still aren't. Boston College had a real difficult time stepping up in class against the better offenses that they faced over the last 2 years. The market's certainly reacting to that. The market's reacting to the spot for Air Force coming off the brutal game against Navy, a team in the midst of a really nasty run. They're saying the Falcons shouldn't be laying this type of price. And I think they're saying Colorado shouldn't be laying this type of price either. The Oregon State money, they've been terrible. And somehow the markets are thinking they're going to get off the ground and play better without Gary Anderson. But in my mind, it's every bit as much anti-Colorado money as it is pro-Oregon State money. Same story with Mississippi State BYU. BYU has been a money burner in the biggest sense of the word so far this college football season. The markets, once again, anyone who's been fading BYU is continuing to fade BYU. It's done nothing but pay dividends all season long.
Up next, big game breakdown. We'll start with the Red River rivalry. A stat on Tom Herman as a dog you will not believe. We'll get to Auburn and LSU as well on SportsBet. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Go to SBROdds.com. Browse, compare, and shop live odds available at top online sportsbooks.
Here we are back on SportsBet, Betting Insight today. Pauly and Teddy. Are we sponsored and powered by Bet Online? It's big game breakdown. 12:30 Pacific, Oklahoma and Texas. Oklahoma's 8, 64.5 the total. Big test for Lincoln Riley in his first season. Keep them on track. Still try to make the playoffs somehow, some way if they can run the table. They lose as a 31-point favorite last week to a third-string quarterback and actually had the lead at the half and couldn't get a stop against a guy making his first start. Got to keep them on task here. Here's Lincoln Riley. Everyone tells us we're supposed to beat Baylor and Iowa State by 60. And then when it's not happening at the half, there's an air of disappointment. I think that's the whole thing we're talking about. We got to get past that. Another one, our expectation has got to be to do our very best, play as hard as we can all the time and not worry about the scoreboard or what people think we should do. We just got to get back to being the best we can, as corny as that sounds. I don't know if a blueprint, but certainly this defense stinks lately under Mike Stoops. They couldn't stop Baylor, and then Iowa State was just running bubble screens and passes out of the backfield to running backs, and they could not stop it.
No, there are a lot of issues to be concerned about for Oklahoma in this contest. Now, one thing that I'm confident about for Oklahoma is that this team is not the type of squad we want to lay big points with. They come out flat against weak opponents. They've done it twice. They did it against Iowa State, and they struggled against Baylor the previous week. So, we've seen them step up for their step-up games, but in their flat spots, Lincoln Riley has not been able to coax solid performances out of his Oklahoma Sooners. The other concern I have, besides what's going on defensively, what about what Iowa State did defensively against Oklahoma? They turned the game around when they went to a 3-man rush and they played deep zone. It really tested Baker Mayfield's patience. That's a defensive blueprint that other teams can copy. Teams, perhaps, like the Texas Longhorns.
And here we go. Here's your money stat you won't believe. Since he was the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, Tom Herman is 12-0 ATS as an underdog, and he's 11-1 straight up. The only loss was earlier this year as a 17-point dog against USC, and they lost by 3, and they could have won that game. He's been a double-digit dog in a lot of those wins. Louisville twice, Oklahoma, touchdown underdog to Florida State. So this is amazing. It goes back to Ohio State when they had Cardale Jones, dog to Alabama, dog in the championship game to Oregon, dog to Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game, 59-0, whatever it was. So 12-0 ATS, going back to his OC days at Ohio State, the run he's on, and 11-1 straight up. And here he is catching 8 points. Looks like Ellinger is now the go-to guy and the man at quarterback. Big kid, 6'2", 230. And looks like he's winning the job over Bouchel. Played well in the win in overtime against Kansas State. The fans certainly love him. Passer rating's close. It's 130-134, though he had the difficult game against USC. And he's a dual threat, unlike Bouchel.
Well, that's the key here, is that you put Ellinger in the lineup, and then you team him up with a guy like Chris Warren, a big back, 6'4", 250. That's a real physical quarterback, running back run component, something that Oklahoma not designed to defend particularly well. Warren so far this season, 270 yards, 5.5 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. This is his first season as a starter. He also has 8 catches for 109 yards and a touchdown coming out of the backfield. So he's proven to be a nice running threat, obviously, and a guy who, whoever the QB is, can find as a dump-off pass and get themselves out of pressure. But when you talk about that 12-0 point spread mark, 11-1 straight up as a dog, this isn't something that's the lead story on SportsCenter. You know what I mean? This hasn't crossed over into the mainstream world yet. So when we're talking about Herman in this particular role, great information that you can find right here on SportsBit, you're not going to find from mainstream sources.
Game number 2, powered by BetOnline. Check out the bonus page, sportsbookreview.com, for the latest and best offers to open a new account today. Auburn is 7 at LSU, 44.5 the total. On CBS, 12:30 Pacific. Stidham couldn't do anything against Clemson, although nobody moves the ball against Clemson. Sacked 11 times. I don't know how good Auburn is because they haven't played anybody since. But Stidham's numbers have been good. 91 attempts, 79 completion percentage, over 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. They were up 35-3 against Ole Miss, and then Malzahn pulled the starters. And there was some backdoor action. There was some late touchdowns from Ole Miss. Malzahn, I quote, anytime you go through adversity, it brings out the best in you or the worst in you. I think it brought out the best in him, referring to Stidham. Also helps that they have great depth at the running back position, 4 different players over 100 yards. Same old at LSU. The quarterback plays atrocious. Canada has been asked by Orgeron to simplify the offense and don't go with so much movement and motion, which what he's doing. Who cares? That win over BYU. Look at how bad does that loss to Troy look now? Troy lost to South Alabama last night as a 19-point favorite. So they won at Florida, but again, they didn't do anything on offense either.
No, not in that game. But, when you talk, that was a great quote from Malzahn, talking about how Auburn has responded well to adversity. Look, that Clemson loss could have been a real stinker for their season. We've seen other teams this year unable to get off or back on their feet after a rough or early season showing. That's not been the case for Auburn. And some of that may be schedule related. Certainly, they haven't faced many elite teams just yet. But the bottom line is they faced the fire. They did not perform well. They came out of it battle tested, and they played better since. Tigers have been real moneymakers for their supporters, something that, LSU has not been. And every time we go to LSU this year, I keep thinking back to the quote we gave right here on SportsBit, talking from Syracuse head coach Dino Babers, who played LSU and NC State in back-to-back weeks. And he's like, it's not even close. NC State's the better team. They're a better team in all aspects of the game. LSU hasn't been able to do anything right this year. And when you look at this graphic, you talk about the great stat for Tom Herman. Look at this, is a great graphic about what's wrong with LSU. All right. Yards per rush, real simple. Offense and defense. 2015, they're gaining 6 yards per carry and giving up 3.8. 2016, they're gaining 6 yards per carry. They're giving up 3.3. Look at the declines this year. They can't run the football as well. They can't stop the run. And that's not going to get any better because you got to look at this graphic. They're starting left tackle, J.J. Malone. They're starting right tackle, Toby Weathersley. They haven't practiced this week. It doesn't look like either is going to be able to go. So this is what LSU's likely starting offensive line is going to look like on Saturday against Auburn. Well, yeah, that's 3 freshmen, including both tackles, as your starting linemen against a nasty Auburn defense. Ed Orgeron, quote, "We have to stay positive. It's the next man up theory. We have a saying that we put 11 men on the field and we fight like the LSU Tigers, and that's what we're going to do." Well, more Ed Orgeron, quote, "They can handle the physicality of the SEC. And it wasn't that they got overpowered. They can handle their one-on-ones. It's more or less alignment assignment. When things are moving fast, they may make a couple of mistakes, which is, you can understand, for a freshman." Well, 3 freshmen starting on the offensive line. No interest in the LSU side for me in this one, Pauly. Be Auburn or pass in a matchup of Tigers.
And I like the under in another low-scoring game with LSU. Up next, Georgia Tech, Miami, and UCLA, Arizona. Might have been the most efficient game by a quarterback in college football history. And the play of the day with Oklahoma and Texas on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRpicks.com.
Research before you bet. Be sure to check out SBR Picks for the best game predictions, breakdowns, and much, much more.
Wrapping it up, SportsBit, Betting Insight today. Big game breakdown rolls on. That's how we do it every Thursday. Pauly and Teddy, sponsored and powered by BetOnline. Georgia Tech and Miami. Miami 5.5, 53 the total. Also at 12:30 Pacific. Game was moved because this game against Central Florida was postponed. Georgia Tech is leaving the campus or around Atlanta for the first time. Marshall has been ahead of schedule. Terrific quarterback for Georgia Tech. Should have beat Tennessee. Wasn't his fault. They couldn't get a stop late, and they also had a couple of key fumbles in that game. His passer rating is 182. 10 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, 523 rushing yards, 5.1 yards per carry, and 9 touchdowns. Paul Johnson on Marshall. I think that the moment hasn't gotten too big for him. That's the one thing I worried about, especially in the first game, getting starry-eyed. Now it's going to heat up. His first road game. I think he's a pretty confident kid, works hard, wants to get better, so hopefully we'll continue to see improvement. So a good job so far out of Georgia Tech. And I don't like the spot with Miami, and you've seen some movement here, as this was 7 down to 5 at some places. They finally beat Florida State, and now they have to play this game and the rest of the season without their star running back, Walton.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough spot in a sense. It's an awkward spot for Miami. For Georgia Tech, there are things to love about it. They're coming off a bye week, and we like Paul Johnson off a bye week. And we like him even more off a bye week when he has a young quarterback and he can tweak the offense around. I don't know how many quarterbacks Paul Johnson has had that can throw this well. Taquan Marshall's as good as anything Georgia Tech has had at the QB position in quite some time. And when you're talking about a bright head coach who designs offenses really well with a talented quarterback and extra time to prepare, well, that's a big bonus for the Georgia Tech side of the equation. But I really worry about teams that haven't hit the highway. And here we are in mid-October already. And they had that game against UCF that was canceled by the hurricane early on. So they don't have that battle-tested, been on the highway, handled adversity type of mentality yet. And make no mistake about it, Pauly, this Miami Hurricanes team, they're really good. I've been impressed with Malik Rozier. You know, he's passed the acid test. Look, he got beat up by the Florida State defense last week. And they were playing without, as you mentioned, Mark Walton, who's likely to be an NFL running back. Well, he got the ball down, 13-10, 6:55 left. Elite defense on the road. You know, no running game. Your top back is out. What'd he do? Rozier, 75-yard touchdown drive in 6 plays. And then he got the ball back again, down 20-17. 1:24 left on the clock, fourth quarter, game on the line. Again, and again, Rozier leads a 75-yard touchdown drive in 9 plays. So this is a kid who's battle-tested already, making plays when it matters most.
Last game, UCLA and Arizona. UCLA is 1 on the road. Look at the total, 78, 6 o'clock Pacific, Pac-12 Network. Mora against Rich Rod, both coaches on the hot seat. But Mora against Rich Rod, UCLA 5-0 straight up in ATS. 98.5, plus 98.5. They beat the spread in those meetings. UCLA off a bye, getting healthy on defense. They need everyone back. Their defense is terrible. 128 out of 129 against the run, and they're allowing 284 yards per game at 6.3 yards per carry. Only Tulsa is worse in yards per game and yards per attempt. and they're going to have to step up against Tate, who may have had the most efficient game for a college quarterback in history last week in the win at Colorado.
Yeah, he sure did. But let me get back to this series history for a minute, because when you're talking about Mora, Jim Mora doesn't have a coaching edge over a lot of guys necessarily. 5-0 straight up and against the spread, covering the number by just shy of 20 points per game. That's a little bit meaningful, in my opinion, when you talk about the fact that, again, Mora's not going to win the coaching battle in a lot of contests. But you talk about the fact, situationally, I love the spot for UCLA. They're off the bye. They get defensive end Jalen Phillips back. They get linebacker Lokeni Toala back. They get Deshaun Holiday back, another linebacker. So that's 3 key pieces for defense. And I'm not saying that UCLA's defense is going to suddenly become elite. When you're ranked 128 out of 129 teams, that's not going to be an elite defense against the run. But getting those 3 guys back should help. Whether it matters is another question. Because Khalil Tate's game against Colorado, you teased it, Pauly, might have been one of the all-time best games by a quarterback in the history of college football. Look at the numbers right here. Okay, rushing, 14 rushes, 327 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's an all-time FBS quarterback record. Pass efficiency, well, he had one incomplete, one incomplete and 1 touchdown, 2.17 QB rating. No quarterback in NCAA history prior to last week had ever rushed for over 200 yards and had a passer rating of over 200 in the same game. So when we're talking about Khalil Tate rushing for 300 yards and having a passer rating over 200 yards in the same game, it's insane. It's never been done before in the history of college football. That's a type of game Khalil Tate played in last week.
Some of the stuff we use on here, it's cliches and coach speak, and some of it's bullshit. This is good. Jim Mora Jr. quote, "It's like playing a Wildcat offense with a quarterback that can throw. We have to play hard, but with patience, played with speed, but with patience, and sometimes it's a difficult combo. We've been working really hard on it, and our guys have a great understanding of what we're up against." And the fact that Dawkins was the starter because he had a shoulder injury, and you've seen a lot of that so far in the NFL and college. Why did one guy start the season when it appears this other guy, the backup, is clearly better? Should be a shootout. Saturday night, Pac-12 after dark. Money time play of the day, back to Oklahoma and Texas, betting number 182. Texas plus the 8. Got to bet this blind. Why not? Ride it out. 12-0 ATS as a dog since he was an OC at Ohio State, and 11-1 straight up. Texas plus the points. They've been playing well. And remember, they should have won at USC earlier in the season. We'll take the 8 with Texas on a neutral field against Oklahoma in this one, and they knocked them off a couple times the last few years. Oh, that wasn't Herman, but they always play Oklahoma tough. That's the play of the day. We'll recap what happens today in Game 5, Major League Baseball. We look ahead at the ALCS, NLCS previews, and the NFL big games on tomorrow's show, the weekend preview edition of SportsBet. Coming at you. We'll talk to you then. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com. Thanks for watching.